As you're all well aware of, it's been a tough week in the Southwest. In particular, it's been a tough few days in the 4th District of Oklahoma. And today I rise to make mention briefly. First, thanks for your prayers and your thoughts and your good wills. But to note also the tornado that rolled through Congressman Tom Cole's district in Oklahoma, from Newcastle through Moore across the southern part of Oklahoma City. Congressman Cole is not with us today because he is still in Oklahoma addressing the needs of and working with his fellow citizens and community members as they try to put themselves back together after this strike by an F5 tornado. Moore is particularly important to our colleague Congressman Cole because not only does he represent the community, he was raised there. His family's buried 2 generations in the cemetery there. So it's a community that's important to him in many, many ways. That said, the good folks in Moore and the other communities will, over the coming days, pull themselves back together. They'll finish sifting through every pile of rubble. They'll have made a determination that there's no one left to be saved as they work frantically to try to do that. And they'll begin the process of laying to rest those who were lost and put their entire community back together. While many folks are well aware of the importance of FEMA and the federal response, Moore is a classic example, and this could be any community in the United States, of where in the greatest tragedy, the most tragic loss of life, city government, county government, state government comes together to work seamlessly to help those in need and to recover those beyond help. We in the Oklahoma delegation and our friends in the Texas delegation appreciate everything that you have and you will help do in this effort. And with that, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time, Mr. Speaker, to the gentleman who represents part of that area and just to the north, Oklahoma City, the great 5th District of Oklahoma, Congressman Langford.
Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those in Texas in the past week in Oklahoma have experienced a storm. We lost 6 in Texas and Lake Granbury, 2 in Shawnee, Oklahoma on Sunday, and 24 in Moore, Oklahoma, including 10 children, 14 adults. We have been overwhelmed with the number of people that have come to us to say, we're praying for you. I'd like to make a request that this body take a moment to pause and pray and experience a moment of silence in honor of those that have been lost and the recovery efforts that are ahead.
Members will rise.
Thank you. We yield back.
Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good job. Appreciate your support.
James, well done, my friend.
Gentlelady from Texas. For all purposes, gentlelady from Texas seek recognition.
I'd like to speak out of order in order to address what we just talked about, the Oklahoma situation.
Without objection, gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you.
House will be in order. Gentlelady will suspend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Democratic side of the Texas delegation, I want to join the other Republicans that came up with the leads from Oklahoma and simply say that this is not a partisan issue. We stand ready to be the assistance and whatever we can do to assist those people in Oklahoma. I represent Dallas. That is closer to Oklahoma City than it is to Houston. And no matter where occurrences might occur, we stand ready as American people to stand by those people who've been affected, notwithstanding party. Thank you.
Without objection, the question is on adoption of the resolution as 5-minute voting continues. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker,
from Colorado.
On that, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is offered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
The House paying tribute to the victims of the Oklahoma tornadoes with a moment of silence. Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett saying this afternoon that some 12,000 to 13,000 homes were affected by the tornado. President Obama will visit Oklahoma on Sunday. On the House floor, they're voting on the rule for a bill that would allow the construction of the northern portion of the Keystone XL pipeline. If the rule is approved, there's 90 minutes of general debate ahead. They will consider 10 amendments. And for the duration of this vote, we take you back to the White House and the briefing with Jay Carney.
So, the President has made clear what he thinks needs to happen here. He's made clear how seriously he views this misconduct. And he has put in place a process at the IRS that will, as its purpose, gather more information and more facts to find out who is responsible and to ensure that they're held accountable. And that, to ensure that procedures are put in place that it doesn't happen, so that it doesn't happen again. And he, we are and will continue to cooperate with congressional oversight into this matter, and with any investigation that the Justice Department might be engaged in.
So you say the President wants to hold people accountable in this scandal. Why then is Lois Lerner still working at the IRS today?
Well, I think it's important to find the facts before you hold people accountable. That's why the President, through Secretary Liu, has instructed the new acting commissioner on the job today to institute a 30-day review. We have, as our starting point, the Inspector General's audit. Clearly identifies improper conduct, the improper targeting of specific conservative groups in the application process for nonprofit status. Clearly inappropriate. And now we need to find out who's responsible. We need to be clear about those facts, and then we need to take action to make sure that those people are held accountable.
Last thing on you mentioned immigration making some progress. Other second-term items for the President have not made progress. Gun control, budget deal. He's been frustrated by those, but he is making progress on immigration reform. Is there any frustration here inside the White House that he's making progress on this big item? It's being overshadowed by the IRS, by the questions about some of these other stories.
No, I think that we absolutely recognize that the IRS issue is significant and deserves attention. We absolutely understand that some of the reporting on what are apparently criminal investigations are of interest, and in particular interest to reporters. And absolutely valid questions about that, as I've said. So that's an environment that's legitimate, and we understand. But what he has made clear to all of us who work for him here and who work for the American people here is that there's an agenda that the American people expect us to act on. And in the case of comprehensive immigration reform, that has become rather rapidly a bipartisan objective. And that is a good thing. And I think it demonstrates that even in this environment, which at times can be fractious and partisan, that there is the potential for significant progress on a difficult issue in a bipartisan manner. And the President believes that those senators and also those House members who have worked on this issue, Democrats and Republicans, and worked with the objective of reaching a deal and a compromise, should be commended. And that amidst everything else, they should be lifted up and pointed to as individuals who are making an effort, as is the President, to find compromise on the kinds of issues that only move forward if there's bipartisan cooperation. Peter, and then you.
For our bookkeeping purposes, if today's the first day of the 30-day review,
for your, what'd you say, your booking purpose?
Our bookkeeping
bookkeeping.
purposes, yeah.
I thought you wanted to book an interview for 30 days from now.
I appreciate it. Well, we'll do that as well if you want to commit. Thank you. But is it 30 days from now, and can you set a date by which the President is expecting to have the results, or that you guys want to hear the results of this review?
Well, full transparency, the President, through the Secretary of Treasury, has insisted that the new acting commissioner conduct this top-down 30-day review. It is a fact that today is his first day on the job, and I think it's safe to say that that clock starts ticking today. I would refer you obviously to IRS and Treasury for their specific timeline within that 30 days and what they expect the end day to be. But As far as the President is concerned, Danny Werfel, the new acting commissioner, who is enormously qualified and has experience under administrations of both parties on these matters, is getting to work today and ought to make this his top priority.
On separate topics, there's a UN nuclear agency report today that says that Iran has increased its capacity to refine uranium by installing hundreds more centrifuges. I just was hoping to get the White House's reaction to that news.
I appreciate the question. I can tell you that I don't have more specific information on that except to say that we're reviewing the IAEA Director General's report, and we will discuss how best to respond to it with other members of the board. But we're currently reviewing the report. It is just released, as you said. On this matter, the fact that Iran is engaged in continued pursuit of nuclear weapons is clear. We have worked assiduously with our international partners, as well as unilaterally, to hold them accountable for their refusal to abide by their international commitments with regards to their nuclear ambitions. And we will continue to do that. We have instituted the most stringent sanctions regime in history, a regime that has had a dramatic impact on Iran, that has made clear that there is a significant cost to their flouting of their international obligations. But I don't have...
That's why I posed
well, I mean, look, we are reviewing this report, and we'll have a comment on it. We believe, and we are engaged in a process, that we know that there is still time for Iran to make this decision to choose to abide by its international obligations, and we are working with the P5+1, which put forward a substantial offer in Almaty to bring that about. And now it's up to the Iranians to respond substantively to that proposal and to address the international community's concerns about the nature of its nuclear program.
Peppering a variety of different thoughts now. Another headline made news today that an Army Sergeant First Class at West Point Military Academy has been accused of planting hidden cameras in the shower and locker room facilities of female cadets. Given what we heard recently from the President in terms of his referring to those who commit these crimes as unpatriotic and the like, how involved is he in knowing about the specifics of individual events, as there's now been a consistent line of new headlines from around the country?
I don't know about this specific report. I can tell you that the President...
The resolution is agreed to. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair lays before the House the following enrolled bill.
Senate 982, to prohibit the Corps of Engineers from taking certain actions to establish a restricted area prohibiting public access to waters downstream of a dam and for other purposes.
For what purposes does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3.
Without objection, pursuant to House Resolution 228 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of House Resolution 3. Chair appoints the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 3, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to approve the construction, operation, and maintenance of the Keystone XL pipeline and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 90 minutes, equally divided among and controlled by the respective chairs and ranking minority members of the Committees on Transportation and Infrastructure, Energy and Commerce, and Natural Resources. Gentleman from California, Mr. Denham. Gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Rahall. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton. The gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman. The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings. And the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey. Each will control 15 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the chairman for the time to express my views on H.R. 3, which will generate numerous benefits to the nation and its economic growth. This pipeline will create American jobs, enhance our energy independence, and strengthen our national security. I'm proud to say that I'm a co-sponsor of this legislation because it represents a significant opportunity to create jobs and spur economic growth in our country. Furthermore, this bill will help the nation become more energy independent. According to the Department of Energy, the pipeline will transport 830,000 barrels per day of oil from Canada to the Gulf Coast, totaling nearly half of our current daily imports from the Middle East. This bill makes these numerous project benefits a reality. What this boils down to is breaking through bureaucratic hurdles and making this project a priority. The southern leg of the Keystone XL pipeline has already been approved, and this bill finishes the job allowing construction of the northern route of the pipeline to move forward. This bill also ensures that the environment and its historic resources are protected through the 5 years of studies that have already been completed on this project. Indeed, this has been the most studied project in our country's history. It also ensures that the project's routing through Nebraska, the primary objection with the permit when it was denied in 2012, is the route chosen by the people of that state. Simply put, as President Obama said regarding the southern route, this bill cuts through the red tape. The project is the most extensively studied and vetted pipeline project in the history of this country, given the nearly 5 years of study and review of the Keystone XL project, with 4 State Department environmental impact statements and over 15,000 pages of publicly released documents. We know the ins and outs and all about this pipeline. I believe in an all-above energy strategy, and this legislation is one piece of that puzzle to break America's dependence on overseas foreign oil. Finally, it's important to remember that this project will be built with private dollars and create thousands of private sector jobs. This project has passed through all 3 committees with bipartisan support, and I urge my colleagues to support this critical legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as it may consent.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, last Congress, I voted for every piece of pro-Keystone pipeline legislation that was brought before this body. Every piece of pro-Keystone pipeline legislation. But you know, something's happened along the way between then and now. And that something is called a hijacking of this bill by the right wing. I support the Keystone Pipeline project. I believe it will be an important element in our domestic energy infrastructure. Last Congress, I was pleased to support and vote for Keystone legislation that was considered and passed by the House, including H.R. 1938. However, I am opposed to the pending measure primarily due to Section 3 of the bill. The bill we are considering today is vastly different from H.R. 1938. That was reasonable, responsible legislation. H.R. 3 is absolutely not. Instead of taking the straightforward approach that H.R. 1938 did, which set a specific deadline for the President to grant or deny a permit for the Keystone Pipeline, the pending measure completely eliminates the requirement for a permit. It waives a permit, and it deems a permit application by a foreign company for a major undertaking in the United States to be approved. As I said, I want to see this pipeline built, but it will not be built under this proposal. Waiving permits, deeming permit applications approved for a foreign company? We don't even do that for our domestic companies. Everybody in this country understands that you need a permit for certain activities. You need a permit to drive. You need a permit to mine coal. You need a permit to build a highway. You need a permit to construct a shopping mall. You even need a permit, a license to get married. So what do the promoters of this bill have to jeopardize this pipeline? What right do they have to jeopardize this pipeline with this frivolous proposal? And that's exactly what we're doing with this legislation. Make no mistake about it, this is a bumper sticker bill, ideology-driven, born of fancy, not fact. Jobs hang in the balance here. an important supply of energy held hostage, this bill is a mockery. It boils down to this: right-wing politics trumping what is right, what is correct, and what is just for this pipeline to proceed through the permitting process, to be built, to put people to work. So let's get serious. Let's dispense with the kindergarten tactics. Too much is on the line here. While the promoters of this bill play politics, I can assure them that this is no laughing matter in the heartland of America. It's my hope that this bill can be improved during House consideration today, and that I'll be able to support it by the time we reach final passage. Otherwise, I will vote no in recognition of what this bill is as currently drafted, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from California.
This is a very serious matter. Thousands of jobs, American jobs, are on the line. Energy independence is on the line. When is enough enough? 5 years? 6 years? 10 years? When will we utilize North American oil in North America? Mr. Chairman, I wish to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Schuster.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I rise in support of H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, which allows construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. And I'm happy to say it passed out of the full Committee on Transportation Infrastructure on May 16th with a bipartisan vote of 33 to 24. And my good friend from California is right. When is enough time enough? My good friend from West Virginia asks what gives us the right. And what gives us the right is the Constitution, the House of Representatives, the Senate, the legislative body, to pass laws, to move things forward, and 5 years is way too long. We need to develop the energy in America. We need to bring energy from our good friends from Canada, and this all adds to the regulatory burden that this administration has put on us. So this pipeline is the lifeline of power of nearly all of our daily activities. The hallmark of America's 2.5 million pipeline network continues to be that it delivers extraordinary volumes of product reliably, safely, efficiently, and economically. Pipelines are the safest and most cost-effective means to transport the products that fuel our economy. In fact, pipelines supply more than 2/3 of the energy used in the United States. And the Keystone XL project will be a critical addition to this extensive network, increasing our nation's supply of oil and thus helping to reduce the cost of fuel used in the transportation sector. H.R. 3 is a common-sense bill that allows construction, maintenance, and operation of the Keystone XL pipeline to move forward. The pipeline has been subject to extensive environmental reviews already conducted, and in fact, it's the most studied pipeline in the history of America. The bill would require no presidential permit process for the approval of the pipeline and therefore avoids further political delays in this project. Of particular interest to taxpayers, this pipeline doesn't require one federal dollar. Further, the very nature of infrastructure creates jobs, and the Keystone is no exception. In fact, the U.S. the State Department estimates that the Keystone will produce 42,000 jobs that would not be created unless this project goes forward. This project has significant positive economic impacts, estimated $3.3 billion. Would you yield me another 30 seconds?
Mr. Chairman, yield an additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
Thank the gentleman. The impacts include an estimated $3.3 billion in direct expenditures for construction of materials and $2.1 billion in earnings. Finally, as noted throughout the process, the Keystone XL will be the safest pipeline ever constructed. Let me repeat that, the safest pipeline ever constructed. It should be approved without further delay. I urge all of my colleagues to vote for this pipeline to help secure America's energy and energy independence. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the ranking member on our Transportation Freight Panel, Mr. Nadler, New York.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the Northern Route Approval Act, which would deem the Keystone XL pipeline approved. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration just measured almost 400 parts per million of atmospheric carbon dioxide, well beyond the 350 parts per million many scientists warn is the level we must not cross to avoid severe climate impacts. Any rational person who doesn't want more Hurricane Sandys or more Oklahoma hurricanes would recognize that we must focus on developing renewable energy sources and reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. And yet, this bill mandates the approval of a pipeline that will allow Canada to deliver 830,000 barrels per day of tar sand oil to Gulf Coast refineries. Tar sand oil is difficult to extract and the process is destructive and toxic. Producing tar sand oil results in at least 14% more greenhouse gas emissions than conventional oil. For those concerned about climate change, the Keystone Pipeline is a non-starter. We cannot allow such a gigantic and irreversible step backward in the fight against global warming. But H.R. 3 goes well beyond the merits of the pipeline itself. The bill sets a dangerous precedent, undercutting our environmental laws and short-circuiting the review process. It deems the pipeline approved by congressional mandate. It locks in the administrative record as of a date certain, eliminates the requirement for a presidential permit normally required for cross-border pipelines, and it mandates the issuance of permits not just for construction of the pipeline, but for operation and maintenance as well, or in other words, in perpetuity. It deems all the environmental and safety laws satisfied regardless of the facts. It also manages to undermine a citizen's fair access to judicial review. The bill appears to grant the right of judicial review by giving the D.C. Circuit jurisdiction to hear any challenge to the adequacy of the environmental impact statement, but the bill also states that the EIS, quote, shall be considered to satisfy all requirements, unquote, of the National Environmental Policy Act. So the court is told, you have jurisdiction, but here's what you're going to find. Never mind your own judgment. The bill also states as a matter of law that Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act, the Mineral Leasing Act, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, the Migratory Bird Act and Endangered Species Act are all satisfied. So the fix is in before you ever get to court. I'm not sure what would be left for court to review. The bill is an unprecedented step in the wrong direction. I urge my colleagues to vote against it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you to the gentleman from California for yielding. Many of my colleagues are correct. We do need a permitting process, but this bill is what needs to happen when the permit process breaks down. This is when a project like Keystone that's going to create the tens of thousands of jobs that many of us in this chamber go back to our home districts and talk about being created, but a piece of paper with a lack of signature is holding this up. Just this past week, our president stood and said he wanted to make sure that we shorten the time that permits like this take, that we shorten the process so that America can begin to put our trades and labor folks back to work again. This, Mr. President, is your time in history where you can sign this permit, create tens of thousands of jobs, and really prove to us that you're serious about reining in this regulatory process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 2 minutes to the valued member of our committee, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Walz.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the ranking member for the time. I also thank him for his longtime commitment to American energy independence. I, too, share that. I have been a supporter of a bipartisan energy bill that brought environmental groups and the Heritage Foundation together, said maybe we can find some solutions to this. I've been a supporter of this project from the beginning. The problem is today this bill has nothing to do with that. It has to do with politics. Today is an example of why this body is less popular than hepatitis amongst the American public. It's not only not going to do anything, it's going to set us back. Many of us want this project done. But I have to tell you, the worst thing we can do is build this and have a problem with it. We hear about the number of pages of regulation that is there. Maybe we needed a couple more with BP and we wouldn't have been cleaning up after that mess. You don't have to choose between building it and compromising safety. You do it right if we're going to do it. Unfortunately, that's not what we're doing. You deem it, you give away those rights. And it's personal for me. I grew up in the Nebraska Sandhills. It was the good people of Nebraska and the Republican governor who told us to step back, slow down, and picked a different route and finished it in January of this year. So when you hear about all the process gets it right. I have to tell you, I do agree with my colleague on this. There's jobs to be created here. We send $1 billion a day to countries that hate us for oil. They'll hate us for free. Keep it here. We don't have to do this, and there have been delays in this project. This bill is a bridge way too far. But be honest with the people. This is not, by building this, going to lower gas prices. It's not the long-term solution to our energy needs. There's no guarantee we even get the oil in this country. But we can come together, build a piece of it, and expand our portfolio. We shouldn't be muddying up with wedge issues. Last time we had this vote, and I voted with it all these times, but one time The political arm of my friends sent a notice out to my hometown newspapers asking why Tim Walz wants to raise your gas prices isn't with America. They forgot and got it wrong. I voted with them. That press release today is already written and sending it back. It's not going to do anything except hurt America's people's faith in our democracy. You're not going to get cheaper gas prices. You're not going to have this thing built overnight. You risk danger. Here's what I ask on this issue. The American people are not stupid. Don't treat them that way.
Expired. Members are reminded to heed the gavel. Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Duncan.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Chairman Denham for yielding me this time, and I want to commend Chairman Schuster and the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, for bringing this bill to the floor at this time. This is a very important bill, and as Speaker Boehner said on the floor yesterday, it would create 20,000 direct jobs and about 100,000 indirect jobs. The State Department estimated 42,100 direct jobs, and these are American jobs. We have millions of people, too many millions, that are unemployed, Mr. Chairman, and many millions more who are underemployed, having to work at jobs far below their skills, talents, and abilities. This will create good American jobs. 830,000 barrels a day of oil being piped down, and this, if it by itself, maybe it wouldn't bring down gas prices, but it certainly would keep OPEC and some of these other foreign energy producers from raising their prices as fast as they surely would like to and have done in the past. I can tell you that if we don't pass this bill and similar bills to increase energy production in this country, all we're going to be doing is helping OPEC and other foreign energy producers. It's time we start putting our own people, our own workers first, start putting our own country first again, and we need to pass this bill to help in that process. I yield back.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a time check?
Gentleman from West Virginia has 8 minutes remaining. The gentleman from California has 7 1/4 minutes remaining.
Okay. I yield 2 minutes to the 1 minute.
1.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes. Okay. We'll compromise. Okay. To the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 90 seconds.
I thank the gentleman for yielding and for his leadership on this and in so many other areas. And I rise in opposition to H.R. 3. It is a very bad deal. It's bad for our environment, our energy policy, American workers, and a bad deal for America in general. The way this bill is written, a foreign company pumping a very dirty form of oil all the way across this country would not have to pay a dime into our oil spill liability trust fund the way that American companies have to do. Under this bill, the highly polluting tar sands that the pipeline carries would produce over 40% more carbon pollution than conventional oil and increase America's dependence on one of the single dirtiest petroleum products there is, just as the predictions of climate change catastrophes grow more dire each and every day, and that is just not right for America's future. H.R. 3 leaves Americans with all of the risk of spills, environmental damage, and air and water pollution, but none of the lasting rewards. It's a bad idea and it's bad policy, and I urge my colleagues to vote against it. Thank you.
Gentleman from California.
There's a lot of confusion out there, obviously, on this very important issue. Some would say, Canada oil? Well, we currently bring 590,000 barrels per day from Canada through the current Keystone pipeline. Keystone XL just gives us an opportunity to have another 830,000 barrels. And some would say, well, why are you going to do this? This has never been done before, but my colleague has already voted for a piece of legislation like this dealing with the Alaskan pipeline, where they expedited the NEPA process, and it was concluded by a voice vote of the entire House. When the project is right to get it done, it's right. These are American jobs that we need. And, Mr. Chairman, I wish to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Rahall.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 90 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gas and groceries. Ask yourself, is there anything else that eats more into your budget day in and day out? And when we talk about your family budget, wouldn't it be great if your dollar could go further? Better yet, at least the prices could stay normal instead of changing every single week. Think about it. Gas and grocery prices are all over the place. One week you go pay for your gas, buy your groceries, maybe have some extra money in your pocket for date night on the weekend. But the next week, the prices shoot up, and you barely have enough money to pay for your rent. But I've got great news. Cheaper prices at the pump and a less expensive grocery bill starts right here and right now with the approval of the Keystone Pipeline. This issue really is as bipartisan as you can get. Why? Because it means jobs, jobs, jobs. We're not talking Republican or Democrat, red or blue. We're talking about green, meaning more money in your pocket. And in that bipartisan spirit, even union members support this pipeline because they know how many jobs will be created. Well, with Republican leadership, we're going to get this done. And union members, this is about you. This is about your opportunity, your job. Not only is this about jobs, it's about our national security here in the United States. Ask yourself, do you really want to continue sending money to countries that really don't have the best intentions for us in mind? Or do you want energy independence, meaning a safe and secure United States for you and your family for generations to come? And of course, more money in your pocket the next time you go to get some gas in your car or buy your groceries. This is about you, your family, your dreams. Thank you. I yield my time.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
reserved. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Rice.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my support for this legislation. American competitiveness is my primary focus. The nameplate on my desk says jobs, jobs, jobs. We've created a regulatory morass in this country that stifles progress on all fronts. We've got to get the government off the backs of our job creators. When I hear that this project has been studied for more than 1,700 days, 5 years, that it would create more than 40,000 American jobs at a time when jobs are so desperately needed, and that it would drive down the cost of energy and cut our oil imports from OPEC in half, and that the State Department has reviewed it and found that it exhibits no significant environmental hazards, and yet the administration still refuses to issue the permits, I'm appalled. We can study this project forever, and we will never resolve every possible question. This used to be a can-do country. If the administration will not make a decision, Congress should. Let's stop wringing our hands, approve this project, and move forward. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes now to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, who, like me, is a supporter of the Keystone Pipeline.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank our ranking member from Transportation Infrastructure for allowing me to speak. I've been a long-time supporter of the Keystone XL pipeline. I'm frustrated the pipeline has still not been approved after 4 favorable environmental impact statements. It's time for the administration to approve the project. I actually represent refineries where most of the oil sands product will go. And the fact that these refineries will continue to seek supplies of heavier crude oil, whether the XL pipeline is approved or not. The problem is that if the President does not approve the Keystone pipeline, he will force these facilities to continue to purchase oil from unstable foreign countries with very few environmental regulations. I want my Democratic colleagues to understand that even if we made all the investments we want to in alternative energy, and I support that, we still need to rely on oil for the next 25 or 30 years. This number comes from our administration. So if we have to purchase oil from somewhere, doesn't it make sense to purchase it from a province that regulates carbon? I plan to support the bill this afternoon, but let me be clear about a couple things. I support the bill because it's a message bill, and it's time for the administration to stop stalling and make the decision. There are provisions of the bill I don't like. I do not support the precedent policies laid out in Section 4 through 8. I also don't know why we continue to send bills that doesn't have a chance in the Senate, except to tell them the House, again, will support the pipeline. And I hope this vote will put this issue behind us, because, again, I have 5 refineries in East Harris County that are ready to use that heavier crude because they're importing it from other countries like Venezuela, which would much better. I'd rather import it from Canada, which is our closest neighbor. And I yield back my time and thank my colleagues.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Mullen.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I rise today thinking this is a great opportunity for Oklahoma and the rest of the state. In Oklahoma, we know that the value of hard work and dedication to one another makes common sense decisions when we're given the opportunity. Common sense tells us that the Keystone Pipeline should be approved. However, during my short time in Washington, I have found that common sense is one thing this town lacks. My congressional district is one of the hardest working in the nation. The southern leg of the Keystone Pipeline is a significant job creator and economic developer directly to our local communities. Listen to these figures. The southern leg of the project is bringing in $5 million a month in construction and other expenses, plus 1,000 jobs in my state alone. Approving the northern leg will bring similar economic benefits to areas along the northern route. Every cup of coffee those workers buy in a small town adds up. Completion of the pipeline would result in 830,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada and the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota and Montana. These are friendly and reliable North American sources. With the approval and completion of the Keystone Pipeline, we will significantly reduce our dependency on crude oil from regions such as the Middle East and Africa. Pipelines are a proven, safe way to transport crude oil. Our country is at a crossroads. Will we take the path that leads to energy independence, job growth, and prosperity, or will we continue to delay? The Keystone Pipeline is an opportunity for America to lead. The time has come to put the interests of the country first, not the party, and approve the Keystone Pipeline. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, how much time is remaining?
Gentleman from California has 2 3/4 minutes remaining. Gentleman from West Virginia has 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you. Yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman. 5 years. 5 years. And still no decision. What does 5 years mean? Well, World War II, where we mobilized America. We went to war. We fought for our liberty and our national security on 2 fronts. Thousands and thousands of Americans worked in our factories, went off to war in less than 5 years. But yet we can't get a decision out of the White House for 5 years on this project? Are you kidding me? You know, if we'd had to wait for the environmentalists to make up their mind, we'd have never built the Panama Canal. This pipeline needs to go down to Texas, near my district, 20% of the nation's refineries. It's a national security interest. Some of my friends on the other side have been bad-mouthing Canada. Let me tell you something. If the United States and Canada and Mexico worked together on an energy policy and made the North Atlantic a North American energy policy, we can make Middle Eastern politics irrelevant. This pipeline will bring in as much crude oil as we get from Saudi Arabia. Mr. President, pick a horse and ride it. Sign the deal. And I yield back.
Chair reminds members to address their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close, although I do have a couple members lurking in the hallways here somewhere threatening to come to speak, so maybe I'll slowly close, unless the gentleman from California wants to use his time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to close as well. Reserve.
Okay.
From West Virginia.
All right. Mr. Chairman, we've had a short debate here, and I'm sure it will continue during the amendment process. And my concerns are, as I stated in my opening comments, the fact that we are deeming a foreign company the outright right, giving them a permit without any further requirements or actions needed, is of deep concern to me. As I said, I have many coal companies that mine in a responsible way in West Virginia. They've gone through the responsible processes of obtaining a permit. Granted, they're having trouble in some areas, but at least they know that they have to obtain a permit to mine. They're not asking to outright be deemed to have a permit without having to show how responsible they are in their operations. But in this legislation, to give a foreign company an outright application is truly disconcerting to this particular member who supports the pipeline project. We had some discussion in committee last week about what I and others view as preferential treatment for a foreign company, and some on the majority side of the aisle refuse to concede that TransCanada is a foreign company, or even that Canada is a foreign country. Well, you know what? The last time I checked, you do need one of these to enter Canada. It's called a passport. So that's really beside the point, but I did want to raise it since I'm sure it will come up before this debate is concluded. But the point is that this bill waives a permit for such a major undertaking. And these companies that are producing these tar sands in Canada, like Exxon, Shell, Valero, CNRL, Conoco for TransCanada, I dare say that they have to obtain a permit from the Canadians to undertake such operations to build this pipeline, and yet now we're saying they don't have to in our country. That's for a foreign company, then that is troubling that we would grant such a permit outright to deem that they have met all safety and environmental requirements when we don't even do that for our own domestic companies. So with that, I would urge a no vote on H.R. 3 today, unless, of course, during the amendment process, my amendment, which is to strike Section 3, were to miraculously be adopted by this body, then perhaps I could support the legislation. But other than that, I would urge a no vote on the legislation. John, you want to speak? Okay. So I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, how much time is
1 3/4 minutes.
remaining?
The gentleman from California.
I will conclude and yield myself the balance of the time. You know, a lot has been talked about here, but let me just get back to the facts. This legislation, if passed, would be passed the same way that in 2004 the Alaska Natural Gas Pipeline, which the entire body passed on a voice vote. Members that are complaining about this bill voted for that very same type of legislation. The thing that gets talked about is the pipeline was deemed. That legislation was deemed, the pipeline was deemed to be in the national interest. This is in our national interest. Energy independence, American jobs. There's a reason to expedite this. Let alone waiting 5 years. We can't afford to wait another 5 years to have an expedited NEPA process then, like it was that the gentleman had supported in the past. This has been talked about. It's a Republican bill. It's a Republican end-around, but yet the AFL-CIO is supporting the bill. The National Brotherhood of Teamsters, the International Union of Operating Engineers, the National Electronic Contractors Association, as well as the U.S. Chamber and National Taxpayers Union. This is about American jobs, whether you're union or non-union, whether you're a member of the Chamber of Commerce or not. This is about getting people back to work and being energy independent. This is a bipartisan bill that simply cuts through the very red tape that the President continues to complain about and helps this nation realize the benefits of this project, the energy independence of our nation. Mr. Chairman, I encourage all members to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Michigan and the gentleman from California each will control 15 minutes. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that I might use as much time as I might consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the Keystone Pipeline and in strong support of the Northern Route Approval Act that will finally make this project a reality for the American people. There may be a few of my colleagues who are tired of the Keystone bills, but the American people are also tired. And they're tired of $3.70 a gallon gasoline. They're tired of unemployment above 7%. They're tired of 4 years of delays that continue to block this critical jobs and energy project. Remember that the President said only last year he would do whatever it takes to create U.S. jobs. For every stated reason for previous delays has now been addressed. Most recently, the reroute of a portion of the pipeline through Nebraska. In fact, you can count Nebraska's governor among the many Americans who want to see the Keystone pipeline bill built. And while some may try to make this a partisan issue here in the Congress, it is not a partisan issue across the country, with a majority of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, Independents supporting the pipeline, including a vote last March on the Senate budget. I give credit to President Obama for saying some of the right things as of late. Just last week, during a visit in Baltimore, manufacturer Ellicott Dredges, at that factory, the President declared, "One of the problems we've had in the past is that sometimes it takes too long to get projects off the ground." He added that there are these permits and red tape and planning and this and that, and some of it's important to do, but we could do it faster. Those are his words. Well, guess what? The very day before, the president of that same company was here on Capitol Hill testifying in support of the Keystone Pipeline and how it would help his business. The president has it exactly right, and Exhibit A is the Keystone Pipeline. Some are trying to claim that this bill is an unprecedented attempt to rush the process. Give me a break. In truth, the only thing that is unprecedented is the lengthy delays that we've already encountered for a project that has been the subject of over 15,000 pages of federal environmental review and, yes, found to be safe. Congress faced much of the same dilemma 40 years ago when the federal red tape was holding up this project called the Alaska Pipeline. At the time, Congress realized that the bureaucratic process had gotten out of hand and that a pipeline that was clearly in the national interest was being subjected to never-ending delays. But thanks to the bipartisan 1973 Transatlantic Pipeline Authorization Act, the red tape was cut, the ground was broken, and the project was built. It became an incredible success story, a game changer for American energy policy, providing thousands of jobs, billions of barrels of oil, while safeguarding Alaska's environment. Guess what? H.R. 3, this bill, takes much of the same approach for the Keystone Pipeline. Unfortunately, while the delays over the Keystone grow longer, so do the excuses. Some argue that Keystone won't create very many jobs, and most of them would be temporary. Tell that to the labor unions and the American workers who are begging for this pipeline to be built. Even the administration's own State Department found that Keystone would support over 40,000 jobs during the pipeline's construction. That's a lot of jobs to me, and the paychecks created by the Keystone Pipeline would be paid for by the private sector, not taxpayer dollars. Some also claim that Keystone won't impact gas prices. Well, the law of supply and demand still stands. Keystone is going to deliver up to 1 million barrels a day of Canadian oil to American refineries. And remember, already today, we are getting 1.5 million barrels from Canada from the oil sands. So, if the pipeline isn't built, guess what? The oil is going to come by truck or by rail, certainly a riskier form of transport, not nearly as cost-efficient as the Keystone Pipeline would be. This will be the most technically advanced and safest pipeline ever constructed. Probably about $4 or $5 million a mile, adhering to the new pipeline safety standards that we worked together on a bipartisan basis, signed by the President last year, adding 57 additional safety standards specific to the project. So for that reason, Mr. Speaker, we need to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 3 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Today, the House Republicans are making the 4th attempt in 2 years to grant special treatment to the TransCanada's Keystone XL tar sands pipeline. That's what happens when you let the oil companies set the agenda. Rather than tackling the real problems facing American families, we're passing legislation to exempt a foreign company from the rules that every other company in America has to follow. And of course, last week, we voted for the 37th time to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We're trampling our rule of law to speed Canada's dirty tar sands oil to the Gulf, where it can be refined and sent to other countries tax-free. That's great for the tar sands developers and refiners like the Koch brothers and Valero. But this bill will hurt American families. It won't lower gas prices by a single penny. It may even raise them. It will lock us into a more global warming and risk our farmlands and our water supplies. No wonder Americans are cynical about Congress. I oppose the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline because it will worsen climate change. Keystone XL will lock the United States into decades of dependence on dirtier tar sands crude, reversing the carbon pollution reductions we have been working so hard to accomplish. Experts tell us that this Keystone XL will triple production of the tar sands, and that's simply not consistent with any future scenario for avoiding catastrophic climate change. We don't need it. We have our own sources of oil here in the United States, and we're using less oil because of our efficiency in new cars that are getting better mileage. So I oppose this bill for these reasons. But even if you support the pipeline, you should oppose this bill. H.R. 3 is an extreme bill. It grants a regulatory earmark to TransCanada, exempting it from all environmental requirements. It's also unnecessary. The State Department is carrying out their review of this highly controversial project. H.R. 3 would approve the pipeline by fiat, lock out the public, eliminate the President's authority to balance competing interests, stop federal agencies from ensuring that if the project does go forward, we do it as safely as possible. The Keystone XL tar sands pipeline is a bad deal for America. We get all the risks while the oil companies reap the rewards. But even if you support it, this bill is harmful and unnecessary, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on H.R. 3 and reserve the ballot.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, at this point I would yield 2.5 minutes to the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Terry from Nebraska.
Gentleman from Nebraska is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I rise in support. Let me quote the President from his speech last week. Today I'm directing agencies across the government to do what it takes to cut timelines for breaking ground on major infrastructure projects in half. And what that will mean is construction workers will get back on the jobs faster. It means more money going back into local economies, and it means more demand for outstanding dredging, the particular business that he was visiting that day. The President's right. But look at the Keystone project that he has purposely denied at one time and now delaying in infamy. So, the nearly 1,705 days is more than double the time that the traditional trans-border pipelines have taken. What this is a $7 billion privately funded infrastructure project that puts immediately 20,000 workers, 2,000 of which come from my state of Nebraska, downstream with the new expansion of refineries that could go up to 118,000. You have to ask, when there's been two other times in history, two of them both supported by the Democrats, sponsored by the Democrats, that is doing the same thing that this bill is. This isn't breaking new ground. This is the Alaskan Natural Gas Pipeline, the Transatlantic Pipeline, both are doing the same things that are here. So you have to ask the question, why, Mr. Chairman, has it taken 5 years to get to the point where all of the studies are done and completed, but yet they're still finding ways to delay? We know what it is. The agenda has been taken over by the left-wing extremists. The NRDC and the extreme environmental groups are dictating the delay here in the hopes of killing it. They have stated that their hope is to kill. That's their #1 issue, is to kill this pipeline. And then they're going to go after other things after this is done. So that's what the real agenda is here. So let's stop saying that this is just an extraordinary piece of legislation. This is modeled on past pieces of legislation where delays and bureaucratic morass has delayed them, and it's time, after almost 5 years, to get the Keystone Pipeline working and the people working. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I please now to yield to our subcommittee on energy ranking member, Congressman Bobby Rush from the state of Illinois. 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized, and forgive me, but for how much time?
3.
3 minutes. Gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank the ranking member for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I strongly disagree with the majority side's process of trying to usurp President Obama's authority